Hi, Stephanie. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect, perfect. Thank you so much for joining us once again.
Thank you for having
Um, of course. And just a quick background from Stephanie. She's the CEO of Foreign Affairs magazine. It's a publication that covers geopolitics, you know, geopolitics and various other topics around foreign policy. And she's the CRO, so she's best positioned on the business side in addition to other things that she will advise us today. Maybe I'll pass it over to you a little to provide a little bit more background about you
Sure.
and foreign affairs as well.
Yes, Foreign Affairs, if you're not familiar with the publication, is a 100-year-old publication. First started in 1922 by the Council on Foreign Relations, which is a think tank. And we are basically the more public arm of that think tank. And we publish a wide range of articles by experts and leaders in their field. And it's really the leading thinkers and the leading strains of thoughts that are meant to start debate about the world's largest, most pressing problems. And the unique value proposition that we bring to our readers is the window into the thinking of the best thinkers in the world, but in a very accessible way. So our editors work with these big names to bring their content, bring their editorial sort of positioning into a very digestible, or as digestible as the subject matter can be, articles. Now, articles are long form, like they can be up to 10,000 words in an article. So it's not a quick hit breaking news type of organization. We really are deep analysis of the world's issues. And that's why people come to us. We have a print magazine, which is published 6 times a year. So we have a good cadence, I'd say, for the heft of the editorial that we produce. We also have a website, though, where we produce daily analysis. And we also have an app for our readers to listen to our podcast, to our audio articles, and our web articles on the go. And I've been with Foreign Affairs for about 6 years now, coming up on my 6th year. And as CRO, I oversee all of the business side. So everything from subscriptions, which is my main focus since that's our major revenue driver, but also advertising, newsstand, production of the magazine, product, web analytics, and digital marketing and content marketing. So it's the whole back end. And it's a wonderful small group that we have here. We have the most amazing team who wears lots of different hats all the time. But we really feel and understand our brand mission deeply. And that's what I look forward to talking to you all today about, how to take a niche product like this and help it punch above its weight in the current media environment.
So when you talk about a relatively smaller team and focusing on contributor led, like the site, I believe gets around over to a couple of million users per month.
Mhm.
Um, so you mentioned that a lot of that came from brand cadence. What can you please maybe elaborate on what that means and sort of how that's helped Foreign Affairs magazine with its current unique selling proposition?
Yes. So Foreign Affairs, we've really leaned into what we do best. I think that we understand that people come to us for those in-depth, long articles from leading thinkers, and we, for better or for worse, haven't pursued a lot of video or a lot of brand extensions. We've really stayed core to our mission. And I think as a result of that, when people see a foreign affairs piece or see any of our branding online, they know exactly what they're going to get from us. And I think that very clear value proposition helps us where people may not have heard about us. We are not a mass brand by any stretch of the imagination. Our circulation is only about 225,000. But for who we are, that's really quite good. And we have about 50-50 international US visits to our site. So we have a nice range of people who are coming in. By the way, I'm so sorry, the sun keeps going in and out. So if I'm getting darker and lighter, I apologize for the sun. But I think we have not done big branding campaigns. We're not out there on billboards like the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. I wish we were, but we don't have that type of brand recognition. So our way of reaching people is really through making sure that our impact is reaching the right people who will then maybe pass along our articles, or larger news outlets will cite the analysis in our content. And sometimes they're good about getting credit, sometimes not. But we are there for people who want to go beyond the surface analysis and really get to the core subject matter and from those experts. And so it's almost like people who are in the know about us, and that's how we've sort of expanded our brand without being out there in mass branding campaigns.
How sustainable? I mean, you mentioned that a lot of the content is led by experts
Mm-hmm.
in the field. There's obviously a less focus on frequent publishing as well,
Mm-hmm.
which is totally cool. I guess how has that been able to be sustainable for all this time?
Well, fortunately, the cachet of the brand um, means that people really want to be published in foreign affairs. There's a great demand. It's very prestigious to have your pieces in foreign affairs because of our audience and because of who's reading this publication. We have a lot of members of Congress, lots of world leaders. Obviously, can't talk about exactly who our subscribers are, but we know from our data that this is the decision makers, policy makers, people who are in the room making the decisions have foreign affairs as a resource. So that attracts a very high quality of contributor. Obviously, we don't get all of the big names all of the time, but where we do find emerging voices are very good to come and work for to write for the magazine as well. And so we'll find up and coming authors who really have something interesting to say or who are breaking policy ideas. So there's a nice mix of established names. Fareed Zakaria wrote our cover story for the Jan Feb issue. And then we have some lesser known names that might be in academia, but it's really the mix. And I think that's why people come to read us, is that it's not a single voice and it's not a single perspective. It's a diverse set of opinions, and it's about as nonpartisan as it's going to get in this day and age. We really take pains to put hawk versus dove and dissenting opinions often in the same issue, just to give a range and let our subscribers make those decisions on their own.
Awesome. So, sorry, with that, uh, I guess shifting gears to a little bit towards the product development side. So, what's some of the steps that you have taken to, or the business took to be able to say, here's the actual product that's working for us today in terms of the subscription offering?
Yes,
What was the thought process behind that?
sure. Let me, if I might, share my screen. We can take a look quickly at our website. All right. Hopefully, you can all see the homepage of Foreign Affairs. Now, I know the homepage is not the most visited page. It's very rare for any site to have the majority of their traffic going to the homepage these days. So this is a little bit of a starting point. The majority of people actually come to us to a direct article page. But this is a good place to start because we can talk about the breadth of our product offering. So we have a print magazine, as I mentioned. It comes out every 2 months, and we recently upgraded the paper for that. It's a wonderful experience, and it's our flagship product, really. But fewer and fewer people have the time to sit down and read a magazine. But we don't want to disconnect completely from it because it's our core product. So in the upper left-hand corner, we actually have access to it, and more magazine brands have been getting away from focusing on their print, and I think we're a little bit of an anachronism now that we have this on the upper left-hand corner. But it's a way of reminding everybody that this comes out every 2 months, and it's worth sitting down and reading. But across our magazine, I'll go to our subscribe page so you can see, we offer 3 tiers of subscription. We have the All Access, which is our most popular bundle, and that is the print and unlimited digital, meaning access to the website and our 100 years of archives, as well as our app, all of our audio, as well as our exclusive subscriber-only events, which are all virtual. We do offer digital, and this is our most digital only. This is our most popular subscription option for international customers, as you can imagine. This is the website and the app, and you get the print edition in the app. So it's not like you're not getting the same content, it's just that you're not paying for the physical copy, which can be hard to send internationally sometimes. And then for those people who are still diehards and still want just the print, we do offer it. Although I will say that we are periodically testing if this is still a need. As you can imagine, most people who come to the website are probably going to opt for either all access or digital. It's a decreasing option for us, but we do know that there are some people out there who just want the privilege of having that print copy come to their home, and that's all they're interested in. So those are our 3 subscription tiers, and the actual website itself really tries to feature all of the different types of content we have, because we don't produce an enormous amount of content each day. We take great pains to surface content. So here in the current issue, we have an article by Bill Burns. We make sure to bring the print content forward. We bring our latest. And our homepage, I won't scroll through all of it, is not an endless scroll. You get to the bottom, you finish it. None of our pages are meant to be that way, in part because our articles are quite long. So this is the view that most customers come and see, which is our main article format. You'll notice that there's a nice set of options over here that we try and make sure are accessible to readers. We have a citation tool, we have permission requests, you can get links. Believe it or not, our most popular engagement is printing the article. Our readers love to take it because sometimes it's hard to read the entire thing on the screen, and they like to print it out, highlight it, take notes, maybe even save it. So we know that because we have a large portion of people coming to our site that come often and also are subscribers, a lot of our web product is geared towards reducing friction, increasing the engagement of our readers so that they are able to actually use the subscription that they're paying for. Let me
Thank
pause.
you for
Yeah.
Thank you for the awesome overview. So the universal question, features versus benefits. So like a feature of the subscription that you're expecting to get is benefit. How do you define that? Because sometimes, for example, I would see other subscription offerings that might have, access to this community or XYZ, but it might not be necessarily a product focused
Mhm.
feature, but they might say that it's that way. So how do you define a product feature versus a benefit, and being able to articulate that when people want to sign up?
Yes, that's hard. Product feature, I think, is a feature of the content that we produce and the products that we have is that you're getting the most current thinking, the most in-depth thinking, often thinking that you can't find in other places. So really, we look back to the content that is there. I'll look to the pandemic. We had articles about a potential for a pandemic running about a year to 6 months before the pandemic actually hit. Some of the articles that were produced actually resulted in policy changes within the administration because of the things they were arguing for. For example, a pandemic forecasting service that was along the lines of a weather forecasting service was something that was recommended in our pages, and about a year later became an actual government entity. So I think that is the main feature of what people get when they subscribe to us. It's the content. It really is, and it should be clean. And we're not able to build. We haven't gone the community building route on this. Our communities are too dispersed. But people come to us for the thought leadership and the ability to read something that is incredibly well written with a lot of substance. Now, the benefits of subscribing are that you get this constant feed of like very clear-headed, excellent content coming to you, but across a multitude of platforms. So for the last 5 years, we've done a good job of expanding our audio articles, which are high quality, read by humans, and really nicely produced so that you can listen because they're long. They're well done. We've introduced a podcast in the last. It's about just over a year old, and it's done very well. We have great newsletters. We have a subscriber only newsletter, which gives context behind some of the articles and does a really good job of resurfacing archival content at times when it's important to understand the history of a situation. As you can imagine, what's happening in the Middle East, there's a lot of history in that region, and we have a great deal of articles that help to show from both sides of that conflict how we arrived at where we are today. And we also have our events, as I mentioned. The events are something that grew out of the pandemic, but have stayed very well attended, mostly because we're able to reach international customers and they find value in that. And that's the almost bringing to life of what we talk about on our pages is starting a debate. So we often have a panel of experts who've usually written for the magazine, and they'll come in and they'll talk about their article and often debate each other. Not like a formal Oxford style debate, but open disagreement or conflicting points of view. And I think that's really healthy. And those conversations don't happen all that much, but when they do happen, we save video, we put them on the app, and we know that it becomes source material for our readers. So we have gone and really leaned into our core competency, which is that very well-produced, high-quality, in-depth content. And that is really what we're pushing out here. It's a very clean product offering, and I think the benefits are that you just feel more educated about the world once you've read some of our pieces.
You mentioned events, the audio version of the articles, and the whole fact that content is the core of all this. So, before we jumped on today, we spoke about the concept of product unison versus
Yes.
them being individual products. So, are you able to elaborate a little bit more again why the content is the product versus again the individual parts not being products, rather than it's just tied back to the content being the core product?
I think it's because we are not big enough. We're a small, small organization, and I suspect we're talking to some other small organizations here as well. We don't have huge video teams or teams that can build out a lot of product extensions. So for us, it's really all about putting our resources into producing the best content possible, and then making sure that the experience of bringing that content to other platforms is the highest quality. I often say that we want the quality of the reading experience to match the quality of the content. And to me, that's a hard thing to achieve sometimes, because you're dealing across different platforms, you're dealing with different distribution tools. And so making sure that those all meet the level of our, quite frankly, of our standards is really important. And then that helps to reinforce who this brand is and why you're actually paying for it. I will say that one thing that we have invested in, and we've been working hard with our third-party partner to continue to enhance, is our app. I think several years ago, apps were maybe not very much in vogue. Everyone was very much about building distributed audiences, building out YouTube channels, building out sort of scale channels, and thinking that people wouldn't want to actually download an app and be immersed in content. I think the pendulum is swinging back now, because our app is really growing and has been refined and introduced in the right moments. Now that as people maybe move away from social, maybe are tired of getting their news through a third-party platform, that they're going back to the brands. Because ultimately, I think the brands can produce and provide the best access to their own content, rather than relying on a third party to do that for them. And I know that was Google's play, that AMP was the famous example that they wanted to use. Google didn't think that publishers had the tools to produce high quality mobile content, so they introduced AMP as a feature to bring that experience out consistently. I don't know that that was the best thing for readers. I don't know that AMP actually did what it was supposed to do other than siphon off traffic to Google. So, the moment we could, we pulled out of AMP and we started to reposition. And I think that was a turning point for us when you start to look at owning your connection to your readers
Mm,
and building that. That is something that we started a long time ago, is starting to move away from having people interact with our content on third-party platforms. And I'm glad we did, because in this moment, we've built up 3 out of our top 4 traffic channels are ones that we own. And that's valuable in this day, is that search is still our number 1 traffic source for sure. It is, I think, for everybody. But looking at how the landscape is changing so rapidly for search, and social has really just shunned news, and moved away from it. That being at the whim of a third party was not really working for us. And so we have built up our newsletter lists to be quite substantial now. We can connect with our readers directly in their inbox. And of course, we have our app. And of course, we have the print magazine. So we have ways of building that direct relationship, which are far more stable and far more long lasting than any of those distributed third party audiences across different platforms.
awesome. Quick question before I'd like to speak more about the lead capture part, because that interests it might be interesting for everyone as well. But Oleg asks, do readers frequently use article audio feature?
I'm sorry, do I use that?
Sorry, Oleg asks about FA. Do readers frequently use the article audio feature?
They do. They do. We used to offer it, we used to see it more on the website, but it's actually declining on the website, and where it's increasing is on the app. So our app users access a lot of audio articles. It's very easy to create a playlist, to pop it in your pocket as you're driving, just turn it on and you put a bunch of articles in and you just go. So especially because with long format articles, listening to them can sometimes be easier to digest than sitting down. A lot of people don't have the time to sit down, kick back, and read it. We learned this from The Economist. The Economist was way ahead of the curve in terms of audio articles. They introduced audio articles, believe it or not, in 2012. And they did that in large effect due to their cancellations were quite high, and their exit survey showed that people just felt like they didn't have time to get to the issues that were piling up, and they weren't getting the value out of their subscription. So they introduced audio, and that really helped with their retention efforts. So audio for us is used as a retention tool. It's there for people to feel like they can get through an issue or get through our web pieces in a way that allows them to continue to feel the value for their subscription. It's a really important tool, I think, these days. And just as podcasts have become really table stakes for any brand out there, I feel like audio articles are rapidly becoming that as well.
And Oleg says thank you with exclamation marks. So I think that's awesome. Thank you. I want to add a question on top of that. So is this voice human or AI? Like I guess we just want to. I'd like to know for our attendees, how easy for them is it to get started with this
So
feature?
excellent question, Vahe. So we insist on human voices for now. And I say for now because the technology is rapidly improving. If you've heard any of the examples, I'm sure people have heard the AI reading. It's very easy to feed text it through and have AI read it back. We have not moved in that direction yet because of the desire to have the quality of our content be as high as possible across all channels. So even though it's expensive for us to produce human recorded articles, it is worth it, because we know that the international names that are very difficult to pronounce sometimes can be consistently pronounced correctly by humans. They tend to have a better cadence to their voice. We just have not seen the AI, even though, again, it's rapidly improving. It's miles away from where it was in the early days. Like even just 2 years ago wasn't good. I think maybe speaking out of turn here, but the Wall Street Journal had been experimenting with AI for a while. I'm not sure if they still are, but I think they're the only site that really has gone into like digital voices. But it's an option out there if your text is simpler, or if it isn't using complex words. We we had it's a funny anecdote, but it illustrated that the challenges with AI. With some of our podcasts, we wanted to do some transcripts from podcasts, and unfortunately, the AI kept saying hummus instead of Hamas when it would hear it, which is really
Oh,
problematic for, and we have to be really careful. And what I want to avoid is moving into a technology that's supposed to save time, but winds up taking more time from the editorial staff, because then they have to go in and edit the translations or edit the audio features. So again, small staff, super careful with how we introduce new technologies, because so many new technologies wind up having hidden costs and they take up more people's time than they realize. So certainly not closing the door to it, but I don't think that the tools are quite there for our purposes yet.
thank you for that. Moving on to lead capture. So
Yeah.
you said some entry points to the website.
Yes.
There's the app. There's the we saw which I wanted to bring to everyone's attention. You had an email box above the subscriber box. So what's the central thing that's going to help you to move people along for acquisition,
Yes.
essentially?
So let's talk about the customer funnel then. At a high level, you'll notice that we do have some articles that are open, so we do have a paywall. We do not have a paywall that is metered. Our paywall is time-based, which is a little different, meaning that articles are sometimes open for 48 hours, sometimes they're open a little bit longer, but they're open for a period of time that varies, and then they're closed. But they're closed behind a registration paywall. So this one happens to be open. Let's see, brands. Let me see if I can find one that is registration only. I think right now all the, but here, I think this one is probably paywalled. Okay, so here, you'll see this is our registration base. So we have this paywall down here at the bottom. That's sort of our base level. This is custom built, by the way. This is not Piano or any of the other out of the box paywall services. We happen to be we're very fortunate. We have an incredible web development team that was able to figure out how to build these collapsible banners to help to remind people that when they're not logged in or they're not paying, this is just a little bit of light friction for them. But the articles themselves, when they're closed, they're behind a registration paywall. So you have to enter in your email, and then a link is sent to your email. So while this introduces a lot of friction, because many people may not want to give their email out, it's better than going the way we used to go, which was we used to have people set up an account. And that felt like too much of a commitment. So this is less of a commitment, but it gives us high quality names because it's going directly to your inbox. And if you want to read that article, you're going to go open an email and you're going to give us a legit email so that you can actually read it. It's not foolproof, obviously, lots of ways you can get around this. But for the most part, we get a very high quality, qualified, interested person joining us. And when they're in, they're also put into our weekly newsletter, because we think that if you're exposed to more of our content, now you're in the top of our funnel. You may start seeing more articles you're interested in. That's a great chance for us to drive you back to the website and have another experience with our paywall. So we're playing the long game here. We're not going to beat you over the heads with a lot of pop-ups or like a full screen paywall. This is a bit more of a subtle paywall, but it's really worked for us, and we've tested into this, and we find that this gets us a nice, healthy amount of leads, and those leads obviously convert at a much higher rate than anyone who just stumbles upon the site. We do have a high number of people who do come to the site and go straight to this order form, right from that right-hand button. That's a very effective button. We tested into the red, really pops. Vahe and I were talking about this at the beginning, and we start the email, the sign-up process with your email. We tested into this. This used to be at the bottom of the page. We moved it up to the top. And the reason it starts with an email is twofold. One is that this is our main point of communication with you. So we really want to make sure we get that on right up at the front. But for those people who fill out their email but may not finish the process, of which that's a higher number than you would realize, they go into an abandoned cart email. So borrowing from retailers, we know that if we go back, if you show some interest, we're going to come back at you with a very gentle reminder or two to come back and subscribe. And that's been very effective for us. At this point, we don't want to let go of any qualified leads. So we try to tighten up and make sure that we're staying top of mind if you've indicated any interest in our subscription. So that's a great best practice if you can test into it, because it just ensures that you're set up for success. Now, I will say that if you are a registrant and we see you as somebody who's already logged in and has registered, or it's not registered, who has signed up for one of those unlocking the articles, if you put your email in through our registration paywall, you don't see this field because we already have your email address. So we try and remove it wherever possible if we already have your information. So you can set up sophisticated ways to dial up or dial down the friction in your flow. So obviously you complete this, and then the second page, so it's a two-step order form. The second page is where we collect your credit card information and your address. So that's very valuable. So that's on the upfront conversion side. I did also want to show you, is it okay, Vahe, if I show our customer
Yeah,
service?
please.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
another product that we have, again, we are very geared around subscription revenue. That is the majority of our revenue. So we wanted to make sure that we were providing the easiest management tools to our readers for their subscription. We don't want to be the most difficult part of your day. So when people sign in, we have this nice flyout that comes out that has a messaging center that tells us little things like the new issue is available. You can subscribe. So I'm not logged in, so it thinks I'm a new person and I want to subscribe. But this messaging changes based on who you are. So it will say, if you're paid up and a subscriber in good standing, it'll say access the new issue. If you are up for renewal, it'll say renew your issue. We also have the ability to put in, during the holidays, we promote gift subscriptions here. If we have a very high profile article that we want to make sure people see, we might put it in here as well. There's a lot of opportunity for additional messaging here. And we like that because it's just another way to service our readers and ensure that we are surfacing content that is relevant to them. And we can do that based on their customer profiles. We have some segmentation tools available to us in this messaging portal. But it allows me to sign in, and here I can get some very light customer service information. So here's my contact. Am I active? A lot of people actually ask. Ooh, did it just kick me out? Oh, I think it did. Here we go. A lot of customers just want to know what the status of their subscription is. And if we can answer their question without having them actually go to our customer service teams, that helps as well. So we like this as an entry point for that. If you click here, it takes us to your customer service page where you can do a lot more things like pay a bill, change your address, all that kind of stuff. We also have, for those people who are saving articles and using us as a resource, like deep researching, maybe reading multiple articles on a certain topic, you can save articles here, you can download PDFs, and you can write notes. See, blah, 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 very detailed. That's,
It's very, I mean, very elaborate, very considerate with the audience. So, I mean, it sounds like the main thing is around reducing friction and retention.
Yes.
So, I mean, how long, for newer publishers that are going through this process and they want to understand their conversion funnel and remove the, like you said, the friction points. You said you've done multiple tests. how long should those tests be, and when should you come to a point where everything's a lot more conclusive so that you could just focus on acquisition as a key thing, or is it just always an ongoing process that you have to accept that people change, people's habits are changing, people's preferences are changing?
It's an ongoing process, and it's going to be different. You're going to hate the answer, but it's different for every brand. It depends on the volume, how comfortable you are with your statistical significance of your tests. I like to start with retention because I think that if you get your retention tools tight, it makes it easier to acquire subscribers. And I'll point to the example of the streamers like Disney Plus, Netflix. Those guys were in such a rush to grow their subscriber numbers that they built out those huge lists of subscribers without thinking about how they were going to keep those customers. And then they started hemorrhaging tens of thousands. I mean, it's a different scale than we're all talking about, but they were hemorrhaging enormous numbers of subscribers every month. They didn't have any mechanisms to stifle that or to really understand why they were leaving. So all of a sudden you're playing catch up on the retention side, and your numbers are sinking, and your senior management is screaming, and they're like, oh my God, we need to grow. And like, you can't grow unless your base is tight. So we actually spent a lot of my first year here. I was like, I need a year to tighten up the back end and to make sure that the current customer experience works before we start growing. We had the luxury to do that. But I think that if you do that, you will save yourself so much heartache, because then when you do turn to acquisition in earnest, you can be sure that when you're growing, you're not working harder than you have to, because you're not replacing huge numbers of people that are leaving, because acquisition is expensive. And it's so much less expensive to retain a customer than it is to acquire a new one. I know everybody on this phone call understands that economic equation, which is why I preach go for retention first. Make sure that that is solid, that you're not losing anyone that you don't have to. That way, everybody you do acquire is going to help you to grow faster because you're not building it on quicksand.
Makes sense. It's fundamental advice. Um, so with retention, is there in terms of reporting, in terms of like a North Star metric, would you say that retention then is the key indicator, or like, I mean, I think publishers that tend to, like you said with the Disney Plus example, that they tend to fall into that mind trap of constantly looking at new subscribers, maybe revenue as the key metrics, and so what should be the mind shift change to be able to, I mean, at the same time grow, but maybe focus on a retention mindset
Yes,
and metric focus.
I really think that I think that your North Star has to be number of subscribers that stick around. I look at it on an annual basis. I think that that's at the end of the year, you really need to know how many people you still have and how many people you've acquired, and so the net of that equation. And then the things that influence customer retention are going to be your engagement metrics. And those engagement metrics should be constantly evaluated and should change based on where your customers are. So we have a set of engagement metrics that measure how people, everything from how people are interacting with the content. So I mentioned printing the articles. We know that that's a big indicator. Saving them, downloading PDFs, that means that they're interacting with it. I want to see those numbers as high as possible, because if they're not using their subscription, they are more likely to cancel. But engagement also is how many audio articles did they listen to? How long did they listen to those audio articles? How are they logging into the app and the website? Are they only logging into the app? And of course, this is a baseline. When was the last time they visited? If you have a high cohort of people that haven't touched the website or your app in more than 2 months, those people are at risk of churning. And you have to watch those people, because maybe there's a re-engagement campaign you should have in place. So it's really looking across your cohort. You're going to have very engaged people, and you have to figure out what engaged means for your brand. Maybe it's time on site, maybe it's number of times visited in the last month, but it should be specific to your site. And then that retention metric will go all the way down. Actually, it's probably more like that, all the way down to the people who are sort of lurking and haven't done anything. And you have to watch those people carefully. Sometimes you will talk to them and they'll be like, oh my God, I forgot I subscribed, cancel. And that's a risk. But you also have probably a number of people who would be like, oh, I totally forgot. This is great. I'm going to go read that article. This is wonderful. So it's discerning the patterns of behavior that indicate whether people will stay with you for the long run or that they're likely to churn. And then based on those indicators, figuring out what actions you need to take to either keep them or to keep them from churning, or if they do churn, how do you win them back? So retention to me is a very deep funnel. It's very, very long. And a lot of your acquisition problems can be fixed if you bring back existing customers in a more effective way too, because they know your product. They're almost like a more qualified audience for you.
I mean, how successful? Sorry, that's probably okay. I think there's a question before I jump in and ask
Yep.
more.
I'll ask another question here.
Um, do you do subscriber surveys to discover features for improving retention? If so, do you find engagement or feedback to be more helpful?
We do use subscriber information. We use a combination of surveys. We're careful with the number of surveys we send in a year because we don't want to alienate our readers. We want them to continue to use the content, but we try and find out the number one reasons that people leave. And honestly, the easiest way to do that is with some sort of a quick cancel survey. So at the point of people leaving your brand, if you can institute a very quick bounce back survey that says, please tell us, why, and give them a couple bullet points. Is it price? Is it that you don't have time to get to the content? Is it the type of content that we're putting out there? It'll give you a quick pulse. We know that, and more often than not across brands, is people just don't have the time to get to the content. And there are some ways that you can manage that. If you have flexibility and you're a digital-only brand, maybe you drop the number of emails that you send them, right? You can customize the product to have it go out to them less. Or if it's price, maybe you drop the price and you give them another offer. But I think that type of quick pulse survey is really valuable to at least have some immediate low-hanging fruit that you can go after from a retention perspective. And then on the engagement side, it's harder to ask them to tell you what they're using for how to measure engagement. You kind of have to look for those triggers on your own data sets. We use Google Analytics, so we don't have fancy omniture reporting. And even through just Google Analytics, you're able to see a great deal of engagement focused metrics. They're not going to be on an individual level. That's harder to indicate, but you can see if there are pools of people that happen to be behaving one way or another. And then based on that, you can put certain blockers, certain things into place. So I would say surveys are good for understanding why people are leaving the brand and what might bring them back. And then data is best for looking at what are your actual engagement triggers.
So success indicator is retention. Engagement is sort of the things in between that you check more regularly than retention. Profitability versus achieving revenue targets. Where does that, if you're saying let's not focus on more of the top level numbers, how do you make sure that the business stays healthy with the product?
Yeah. For us, we want to constantly balance the price that we're bringing people in at with the number of people we're bringing in. So to be honest, we are always price testing. We are always price testing up and price testing down. And I think that is just a good habit to be in because you can kind of see more how price insensitive your audience is. And we're starting to see some interesting things in the data that there actually might be price sensitivity between those three subscription tiers that we mentioned. And our subscription tiers are very simple. We're not very complicated. But there's less price sensitivity, as you can imagine, on the top tier. For people who just want all of it, it may not matter as much what that price is. Whereas for the digital only, which we know goes to more international folks, there's some emerging price sensitivity there that we hadn't seen clearly before. So that might tell me that I need to spend more time differentiating those two tiers and pricing into it. Overall, though, in terms of customer acquisition costs, our benchmark is that we don't spend more to acquire that customer than we make in the first year. Our economics are such that we don't need to lose money in the first year of that contract. We should be profitable in year one, which is a very high bar to set. I get that. We have a luxury of being in a stable position with a really good and growing customer base that we can do that. I spent the majority of my career at Time Inc., and we used to look very hard at 5-year LTVs. And over a while, after some time, we realized that 5 years was too long a window. So we actually looked at 3-year LTVs. And we were willing to lose money, maybe $5 to $10, depending on the price point of the magazine, in year one, as long as that retention rate was really strong from year one to year two. So we could do more introductory pricing and really lower it to convert people into two so that they were profitable by year three. So I think it depends a little bit on the length of the horizon of your business. We have a very long horizon, but we also have very high criteria for bringing somebody in. I'm not going to drop my price really low. I'm not going to do free trials. It's just not, that doesn't work for our business because we don't need that many new people coming in every year because our retention funnel is so tight. So it's a very, as you can tell, there's no simple answer here, and it's a very complex equation of balancing the number of people who are coming in at that right price point that continues to make the best revenue for you.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. I think that gives even though like there's no sometimes the answer is not the answer. It's just some experience. Sometimes you have to think about things in a certain way, and I think that gives tools for people to consider that. Um, what is FA's priorities for this year in terms of the product? I mean, there's a big election year as well. Obviously, is that going to be factoring into how it's going to shape the product and subscription offering and so forth? And yeah, what
Sorry,
do you see for this year happening?
did you say AI?
No, sorry. The election this year. I'm
Oh,
sure
the
that that's
election.
going to
Oh,
going to
yes.
influence maybe a lot of the content and maybe how that's going to shape the product potentially. Just want to get your thoughts on what the priorities are for FA this year.
That's such a good question. I think it's safe to say that no one in America has any idea what this election is going to be like. And current sentiment is that this is likely an election unlike what we've seen in the past. When there were a large number of viable candidates, FA has sometimes featured foreign policy manifestos, for lack of a better word, in our pages, written by the candidates or the candidates' foreign policy leaders. Because that's where, again, you would come to publish if you're a potential candidate, this is where you would come to put forward your vision of what foreign policy should be. Because we have two candidates that have been around for a while, potentially both have been president before, we don't really have that need. They have track records. They have deep track records, and they're actually quite vocal about what they think, or both vocal and obscure about what their foreign policies are. So we're thinking about it. We don't have, I'd say, we're staying flexible on how we're approaching this election. And I think it is partly because we want to be able to react as issues from the candidates come up. But it's not a typical election cycle where you can peg certain pieces on certain tent poles based on those candidates. And I'm not sure we're going to see typical election year numbers either. There's a lot of indication that at least people in the United States are tuning it out. And certainly social media in a lot of places has dialed down. Facebook is like almost not putting news out at all. Threads has openly said that they're not putting political content. we have been unable to really get a lot of traction on those platforms and if you think about the last election, like all the conversation happened on those platforms. And I don't think any of the conversation is going to happen on those, or not much of it is going to happen on those platforms this year. So that changes the dynamic tremendously. Is it going to happen on TikTok? Maybe, but we're not a brand that goes on TikTok. We're not appropriate for that audience or that platform. So it presents an incredible conundrum given the challenges of the audience's interest in this, the actual viability and desire to hear from the candidates, and then the platform situation is really different. We're just going to lean into what we do and continue to leverage the channels that we have built for direct access to our readers, so that if we do have something interesting and we do have something worthwhile from either of those candidates, we will bring it to them in the way that makes the most sense through our direct channels.
Awesome.
It's a
Thank
tough
you
one.
so much, Steph. It's a tough one, but I think yeah, you've answered that. You're just gonna stay flexible depending on how the sort of reaction of the environment. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to pass it over to our attendees. Any questions? Any additional questions, thoughts that we can share with Stephanie? Or that you can ask Stephanie.
Mhm.
Any questions? Yep, we've got someone typing up.
Oh,
Print
print circulation.
circulate.
Yep. So our print circulation is, according to our AAM statement, is about 225,000, maybe 222 last check. We are about 75,000 digital and about 150 in the print bucket, but the print bucket is not exclusively print, as you can imagine. The digital only is 75,000, and they're mostly international. So a good size. We're quite happy with that. Our fun little, I don't know if anybody does newsstand, if your publications have newsstand sales, but that's been an interesting story. I'm happy to go into that, Vahe, if you think it's valuable for this group.
Yeah, I think we've got a few minutes, so we can elaborate a bit more on that for sure.
Okay, so very quickly, newsstand sales. Sort of a necessary evil. They're expensive, but they're a great form of advertising. But newsstands are disappearing. A lot of gum replaced checkout line subscriber copies, and people are on their phones all the time. So really the best places to get magazines these days are at airports or in bookstores. The pandemic hit and we lost more than 50% of our newsstand sale. It was devastated. And I was pretty convinced at the end of 2020 that we were not going to have a newsstand channel anymore, which had major ramifications, not for revenue. It's not a huge channel for us. It's not that expensive since we don't buy pockets, but it is the best form of advertisement because when a new issue comes out, you can see it, you can flip through it. It's very rare to have that kind of sampling. And I was worried about an out of sight, out of mind situation. But we took the opportunity instead to completely redo our distribution and pulled back on hard on places that weren't selling and reallocated our copies. We wound up cutting our draw by more than a third. And slowly over time, as international travel returned and people started diving back into books, our sales had come back to pre-pandemic levels, but with a third less copies going out. So our efficiency has skyrocketed. We see an efficiency of over 45% on the copies that go out, which means that almost 50% of our copies sell, which is remarkable. The industry average is closer to 20%. And we were not that high before either. So we've also raised price during the same period of time. We went from $12.99 to $16 per issue on the newsstand. So we are back to the same levels with a third less copies going out and almost $3 more per copy being earned. So it's a rare success story in terms of channels bouncing back from the pandemic, but I mentioned it only because for new publishers, there might be ways for you to get your brand out to very targeted audiences through this old school channel, which might actually bring you people that really stick around. And there's lots of examples of digital only brands that are actually introducing print editions now, either in special issues or even quarterly issues. They're a little expensive, but you can sell them for a high price, and they stay out on the newsstand for a long time, so they have a chance to generate a lot of sale.
Perfect. Thank you so much. One more quick question, and then we'll have to call time. There's a follow-up question. Do you publish bookazines?
We don't. We looked into this, but we ultimately determined that because we have about a 200-page magazine that comes out every 2 months, we don't need a bookazine. Our sale of about 60 days is roughly what a bookazine would be already. And we also were worried that it was going to cannibalize and confuse our core product. We didn't have enough editorial capacity to build out, and I did. I looked extensively and worked with Edit to try and figure out if we could repackage archive content. But the archive content, even if it was evergreen, you'd need it to be topical. And as you know, the news has changed so quickly that it didn't quite work for our editorial formula and with our publishing frequency already. However, bookazines are a great way to go if you have a higher frequency or if you don't have a presence on the newsstand, because they stay out on sale for longer and they have a strong topical nature, and people who are interested in that topic will gobble it up. So if you ever look at newsstand sales in Barnes & Noble, bookazines really are dominating the top of the sales charts.
Awesome. And with that, it's definitely thank you so much. Very comprehensive insights. You're the expert as well, and I learned a lot as well from my questioning to you as well. So thank you so much for taking your time to join us, and thank you everyone else who's also contributed with their questions and with their feedback. So with that, we are concluding this week's WP Publisher Week. Uh, Once again, we'll be sending everyone the summary of the insights so that you can get these actions and takeaways for you to start moving forward. And at the same time, once again, thank you to our sponsors, Multidots, for enabling us to run this type of session. So with that, I wish everyone a good rest of the day. And until next time, thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, Vahe. Thank you so much for having me.